Y'all ready for this? Let's go.
Welcome back to the Ben James Smith podcast. This episode is one I've been thinking about for a while because there's a side of property development that people don't talk about. You see the glossy finishes, you see the completed schemes, but what you don't see is what happens when things go wrong. And more importantly, what happens when the narrative gets it wrong. Let's start with the reality of development. In property development, there are usually three key players: the developer, the funder, and the contractor. Now on paper, it looks simple. Funding comes in, work gets done, project completes, everyone gets paid. But in reality, it's a lot more fragile than that because everything depends on flow. Flow of funds, flow of decisions, flow of communication. And when that flow breaks, everything changes. When funding slows down or decisions stall, the first thing that gets hit is the supply chain. Contractors don't get paid on time, subcontractors feel pressure, momentum disappears, and then something really dangerous happens. The narrative starts to form. People start asking, what's going on? Where's the money? Who's responsible? And if there isn't clarity, people don't wait for facts. They create their own version of events. And this is where it gets dangerous. This is where things can go from a commercial issue to something much bigger. Because once a narrative takes hold, especially in today's world of WhatsApp groups, social media, online commentary, it spreads fast. And the problem is, the loudest voice is rarely the most accurate one. I've seen situations where a contractor who hasn't been paid ends up being portrayed as the problem, which is completely the wrong way round. But that's what happens when facts are missing and assumptions fill the gap. What people often don't understand is this: in complex developments, there are layers. There are funding structures, legal agreements, decision-making processes behind the scenes. So when something goes wrong, it's almost never as simple as this person didn't pay, that person disappeared. There's always a chain, a sequence of events. And if you don't understand the chain, you don't understand the truth. Which brings me on to the causation point. And this is the key point I want to get across today. In property, outcomes are rarely isolated. They are caused. There is always a sequence. Something happens, which triggers something else, which leads to a result. But what often happens is people only see the final result and assign blame there, instead of asking what actually caused this. Because when you look at the full chain, the story can look very different. And behind all of this, there are real people, businesses, teams, reputations. When things go wrong, it's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It affects companies, employees, personal reputations. And once a narrative is out there, it can be very difficult to correct. And this is where things change for me. Because after going through this, after seeing how fragile the system can be, I realised something. The problem isn't just individual projects. The problem is the structure itself. It's the funding structure and reliability of it. The traditional property development model relies heavily on third-party lenders, external decision makers, fragmented control, and that creates a fundamental issue. The people delivering the project are not the people controlling the capital, and when those two things are misaligned, you get delays, funding bottlenecks, pressures in the supply chain, and ultimately breakdowns in trust, which is exactly where these narratives start forming. So if you go back to what we discussed earlier, outcomes are caused, and in this model, the root cause often sits here. Misalignment between capital and delivery, that's the trigger. Everything else you see is just a consequence. So instead of just accepting that, we asked a different question. What would this look like if we remove that risk entirely? And that's what led us to build something very different. So instead of just accepting that, we built a solution. We're now structuring a £50 million debt and equity fund based in Luxembourg, specifically designed to solve this problem at its core. The key difference is simple. We don't rely on third-party lenders to control the project. Instead, capital is structured within the fund. Deployment is controlled within the fund. Decision making is aligned with delivery, which means no external funding bottlenecks, no misaligned incentives, no disruption to the build program, and most importantly, no breakdown in the supply chain caused by funding decisions outside the project. For investors, this is critical because what you're really investing in isn't just property. What you're really investing in is certainty of execution. And the biggest risk in development isn't planning, build cost, market conditions, it's funding structure failure. Because if the funding fails, everything fails. So by controlling that structure, you remove the root cause of most problems. So everything we've built into this model comes from real world experience, not theory, not spreadsheets, real first hand experience, seeing where things break, why they break, and what needs to change, and then designing a structure that removes those failure points entirely. This isn't about avoiding risk completely, that's impossible, but it is about controlling the risks you can control and eliminating the ones that don't need to exist in the first place. So if you take one thing from this episode, it's this: always look at the structure behind the opportunity, because that's where the real risk sits. And in our case, it's exactly why we chose to build a model that aligns capital and delivery, removes dependency on third-party lenders, and ultimately creates a more stable, predictable outcome, not just for developers, but for investors as well. Because the difference between a successful development and a failed one is very rarely the property itself. If you found this useful, make sure you follow the podcast. This is exactly the kind of real-world insight we'll be sharing more of. Until next time, thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next episode.